I'm Steve Stifler.
I'm Sterling McGinn.
And we're back with another edition of Behind the News. How are you doing today, Sterling?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. So let's talk about the March 1st edition of the Newberry News. On the front page, lead article is, should McMillan Township pay a lobbyist? Now, you were at the meeting. Tell us about it.
Well, I attended the McMillan Township meeting. It was held on Monday, and it was very interesting because there was approximately 12 members of the public there, which is...
That's a rare thing.
It is, yeah.
At times.
And the majority of them spoke during public comment, and they were opposed to the McMillan Township paying a lobbyist to help secure a state budget line item for paving the road, the County Road 410 and 407, which has been an ongoing project for the last few years.
Right.
And so the township had, at their last meeting, so it had been in the January meeting, John Waltman, who is the person that's kind of been spearheading this project, he approached the township to see if they would contract with a lobbyist. So they voted to contract with the Midwest Strategy Group at a cost of $2,500 per month to be in Lansing to help secure this appropriation. They were supposed to get some additional money, but that didn't happen. So they needed the lobbyist to try to get this back on. And so they had a $6 million grant that was written by Waltman, and that money has been used to, they want to begin the groundwork of the project, but there's not enough money to finish the groundwork, and there's certainly not enough to even pave it. So if they're able to secure some money, this would be to finish the groundwork. And so there were a lot of citizens that were there that were mostly Deer Park residents who feel that this is going to bypass Newberry, and it's going to cause a lot of increased speeds on County Road 407. There's just a lot of factors that there's people against the project. So
the lobbyists, how much are they going after at the state level?
I believe they need an additional $5.5 million to complete the...
That's just the groundwork,
The groundwork.
Right? So once that is done, then they need additional funds then to pave the road? Is that how that works?
John Waltman had indicated at the January meeting that he may come back to ask for more funds for a lobbyist to get the funds for the...
the road, paving the road.
Because that was one thing that the township members, board members asked John Waltman, is that, are you going to come back and ask for additional funds for phase 2 or to get a lobbyist to lobby for phase 2? And he said that he probably would. But he indicated that he would be coming to the township meetings on a monthly basis to inform the board as to the status of the lobbyist.
Okay.
But they voted for a maximum of 8 months.
8 months.
So it could be about $20,000 if it goes the full 8 months for the lobbyist.
Okay. So $20,000 to try to secure $5.5 million. So the people that showed up, how you said each one was able to make a comment and everything. How did that go? Because I know sometimes in these controversial matters, things sometimes can get a little heated. Not all the time.
Yeah, it was a little bit heated. It was kind of a back and forth thing, which most councils or boards that you attend, they usually have a 3-minute limit, and you have to state your name. That didn't really happen, so there was a lot of back and forth between the board members and the guests, and in the guests back and forth between the guests, and it was kind of hard to keep track of that. But they all, I'd say the majority that attended all expressed that that they were not in favor of moving forward with this project at all.
What were some of the arguments that they were bringing forth?
The biggest thing that a lot of people have said is that this whole thing is going to bypass Newberry, because if visitors are coming up from, say, the Lower Peninsula, and they start in the Sioux, and they go to the Sioux, and then let's say their next stop is Paradise at Tequamanon Falls, and so they head down 28, and they turn at Eckerman Corners, go on 123. They're in Paradise, go to the Shipwreck Museum, then they're going to go to the Lower Falls and Upper Falls. And then people are saying that, well, they're going to get to 4 Mile Corner and turn, and they're going to completely bypass Newberry. Other people are concerned that there's going to be a lot more traffic on 407 going to 410, and they're concerned about will there be enough patrol of the police, law enforcement, and will the increased traffic cause more accidents? Is there enough paramedics, EMT to handle? I mean, there's a lot of things that people are bringing forward.
A lot of what ifs, huh?
But then you have the people who are for the project, who think that it'll boost the economy. We'll have more people in the area. So there's both sides to the
argument.
Issue, so.
Right. Let's look at another article here. This is one that always perks me up, and I'll explain here in just a second. It had to do with the funds released by the state due to marijuana sales, cannabis sales, and the state released almost $60 million to, it says here, 224 municipalities and 64 counties across the state. My take is that all the counties around us allow cannabis sales, and yet we here in Luce County have, for the most part, said no right now.
The village of Newberry voted to opt out of it. The only entity around here that in Luce County that didn't opt out was McMIllan Township, but however, they did not create an ordinance. I was at one meeting when the supervisor had explained that he was approached by somebody who was interested in getting some land north of Newberry and putting up a growing facility.
Mm-hmm.
However, the township did not have an ordinance regulating that, so I haven't heard anything after that.
I know Mackinac County, for right now, has opted out. There's no cannabis stores in Mackinac County. But I'm looking at some of the totals. Alger County, $111,000. Chippewa County, $622,000. Schoolcraft, $103,000. And I just think of what those type of funds, what that could do for us here in Luce County. I mean, I understand people's arguments, but I think about prohibition, how people were against alcohol. And now the cannabis sales is legal. Are we missing out? Some people will say no, we're not. I just think of what money talks, what those kind of funds could do for us here in Luce County, or the village of Newberry, or any of the other townships around here. So what do you think about that, Sterling?
I really don't have an answer to that. It's just like I've attended these meetings of the boards that did not opt in, and I was interested in the meeting with the McMIllan Township that had explained that someone was interested in a facility, but McMIllan Township had talked about creating an ordinance, but then it was never brought up again. So
right. I'm sure if that entity or business probably would have pursued it more, I'm sure that there would have been an ordinance that would have been created. And finally, you wrote a historical piece for the paper. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I wrote a story on the kind of the history of automobile dealerships in Newberry. Of course, I've always been fascinated with the history of automobiles, but I thought we would look into the dealerships. The first automobiles in Newberry were owned only by local physicians and business owners. And it wasn't until Henry Ford created the famous Model T that now the average citizen could afford to buy a car. And one of the first dealerships in Newberry was owned by James C. Foster, who owned Foster's Hardware. In conjunction with the hardware store, he sold Ford cars. And so that was one of the first dealerships. And then one of the other early dealerships was started by Matthew A. Sorrell Sr., who originally was in the business of renting and of horses. He had a livery stable here. And at one time, he actually had owned the Newberry and Deer Park stage line that brought people back and forth between Deer Park and Newberry, which was quite a trip in those days. But in 1916, he actually started renting automobiles. But there was such an uncertainty still at that time. Is this whole car thing going to amount to anything? So he stayed with horses at the same time as he was renting cars. But then by 1919, he realized he had an opportunity to make some more money here. So he started a Chevrolet agency in 1919. And so he kept horses for a while still. And then some of the other dealerships were one was owned by Andrew Westine, who had the big mercantile store here in Newberry. He sold Dodge Brothers cars, and then later he added like Overland and Willys Knight and some of the brands that you don't hear about anymore. And then across the street from us here at the Newberry News, where Tangled Creations is now, a person from McMIllan by the name of Charlie Munt had a Oakland and Hupmobile dealership across the street in the same building, which is now Tangled Creations.
Really?
Yep. And of course, Sorrell's later became Knopf Motors, and Ray Knopf, he had the Chevrolet dealership, but then expanded. And then of course there was Teskey Rapp Motors, Fawcett's Garage. There was also a dealer from Manistee that had a sales shop here. And then the Newberry Motor Company, not Newberry Motors, but Newberry Motor Company sold Ford because later Foster transitioned into selling Buicks. But there was two men that owned the Newberry Motor Company, and in 1929 they constructed a brick sales showroom and a garage on Newberry Avenue. And in 1934, they sold that business to William Carmody, and he kept the business until 1950 when he sold to Joseph Rahaly, who owned Rahaly Grocery, and he renamed the business Rahaly Motors. And of course, that's now Chuck Renzi Ford. But the current Ford garage was built in 1929.
And there was a showroom.
Yeah, and it was built just in time to showcase the fabulous Model A Ford, which was one of the most popular cars at that time.
Right.
So there's pictures. We have pictures of the Model A in the showroom, and then in the garage, the Model A's that are being worked on. So it was really interesting how the automotive business changed Newberry from when the first cars were showing up and people were protesting the cars. They didn't think that they were ever going to amount to anything. And the next thing you know, we had all these dealerships here.
I just think it's really interesting how people would protest an automobile. Yeah, but that's a big change from a horse to a car.
Yeah, when one of the first cars in Newberry was owned by Doc Gregory. He was a dentist, and he had an Orient buckboard. And I think it had like a tiller instead of a steering wheel, and it just had a small little engine on the back. And one of the businessmen here, Mr. Shattuck, he did not like the automobile. He thought it was going to scare horses. He thought it was going to have cows producing sour milk. He thought that they should be tied up when not when left on the side of the street, and that people,
Tying up the car.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then they thought that the speed limit in Newberry should not exceed 2 miles an hour. 2 miles an hour. And then one of the other early automobiles, I think the earliest one that was noted in the Newberry News was, I think, 1903 or 1904, was Dr. Henry Perry had a car, and the Newberry News just noted that he broke his wrist while crank starting the car, because in those days, before the electric motor was invented, people had to crank start their cars, and if you didn't hold the device properly and the car misfired, it could cause you to break your arm when you're trying to crank it. So
those early cars, do you know what those cost?
Yeah, like a Model T. I think the first Model Ts were going about like $700, something like that, and then Model A's were going about $495 to $595, depending on, like the sedans were more expensive than the coupes, and then the Roadsters and the Phaetons were more expensive. But one of the ads that I put in the article was a 1923 Dodge Brothers sedan, and I think it was like $1,300, $1,200 or something. And that was pretty expensive.
That's a lot of money back then
for an average working class citizen to purchase. So the Model T is really what got everybody on the road.
That is so interesting. Well, I think we'll wrap it up for this week. We want to thank those that tune in, and we hope that people find this interesting, because I certainly find it interesting to talk about these things. So we'll stop for now, and we'll do it again next week. Thanks a lot, everyone.